5 dirtiest kings in history you won't believe existed. History often paints kings as majestic figures draped in velvet, crowned with gold and ruling with authority. But what if behind the throne, some of the most powerful rulers were also the filthiest men alive? We imagine royalty as clean, refined, and dignified. Yet many kings throughout history lived in ways that would shock even their poorest subjects. Some refused to bathe, wearing the same filthy clothes until they fell apart. Others filled their palaces with foul stench, believing water itself was dangerous. And some indulged in habits so grotesque, so dirty, that chroniclers struggled to record them without disgust. These were not just lapses in hygiene. They were reflections of power, arrogance, and sometimes sheer madness, proof that a crown could not wash away filth. So here's the question. Can you still see these men as kings when their lives were crawling with grime, excess, and moral rot? Or does history remember them better as cautionary tales, proof that even those in the highest places could live in the dirtiest ways? Tonight, we reveal the truth behind 5 rulers whose legacies are as foul as they are fascinating. These are 5 dirtiest kings in history you won't believe existed. King number 1. James I of England. The unwashed king when James I ascended the throne of England in 1603. Many expected a regal monarch who would embody dignity and refinement. Instead, what they found was a king whose personal habits shocked even his closest courtiers. James, I quickly earned a reputation as one of the dirtiest rulers in European history, so much so that chroniclers described him as the most unwashed king of England. James had an intense fear of water, convinced that bathing could spread disease rather than cleanse. He refused to wash his body for months at a time. He wore the same clothes until they were literally falling apart, and he avoided changing them unless absolutely necessary. His skin was said to be coated with grime, and his fingernails grew long and filthy. Courtiers complained that the king reeked, yet few dared to comment openly to his face. But his filthiness was not just physical. James was notorious for his vulgar manners, spitting in public, picking at his body, and making crude jokes, even during official ceremonies. For many subjects, his behavior was humiliating, stark contrast to the grandeur expected of a monarch who ruled both England and Scotland. Yet, despite these habits, James I was no weak king. He united the crowns of Scotland and England, commissioned the King James Bible, and survived multiple assassination plots, including the infamous gunpowder plot. His reign was marked by political and cultural significance, but his personal legacy remains tainted by the stench of his filth. History remembers James I as both a powerful ruler and a cautionary tale, proof that even a king can live like the dirtiest of men. King number 2. Louis XIV of France. The king who hated baths, the Sun King, Louis XIV of France, is often remembered for his glittering court at Versailles, his obsession with grandeur, and his role in shaping France into a dominant European power. But behind the opulence and golden mirrors of his palace, Louis XIV lived with habits that today would be considered shockingly unhygienic. For all his wealth and majesty, he was a king who truly hated baths. Like many of his contemporaries, Louis believed that water was dangerous, that it could weaken the body and open the pores to disease. As a result, he bathed only a handful of times in his entire life. Instead of water, he relied on heavy perfumes, powders, and layers of clothing to mask his odor. The court of Versailles became infamous for its stench, with nobles and servants alike avoiding regular washing and using scented handkerchiefs to survive the overwhelming smells of unwashed bodies. Now, Louis himself reportedly suffered from terrible dental hygiene. Chroniclers note that his teeth were black and rotting, and foul breath made speaking with him unpleasant. Yet he continued to indulge in lavish feasts, consuming rich foods that worsened his health and his odor. The irony was striking. The most powerful monarch in Europe wrapped in silk and gold, yet unable to escape the filth that clung to his body. Despite this, Louis XIV commanded loyalty and fear. He ruled for over 70 years, the longest reign of any European monarch, and transformed France into the cultural and political heart of the continent. His refusal to bathe became one of the most enduring aspects of his personal legacy, a reminder that even kings could live in ways that disgusted those around them. Louis XIV's reign was glorious. His private habits tell a dirtier story, one where majesty and filth walked hand in hand. King number 3. Peter the Great of Russia, the emperor of excess and filth. Peter the Great is remembered as the Tsar who modernized Russia, dragging his empire into the modern age with reforms, naval power, and a vision of Western influence. But behind the achievements that earned him the title Great was a man whose personal life was marked by excess, vulgarity, and filth. For many of his courtiers, Peter was as terrifying in his private habits as he was on the battlefield. Peter was known for his violent temper and bizarre amusements. He often hosted drunken banquets that spiraled into chaos, where guests were forced to drink until they collapsed. He created his infamous all-joking, all-drunken synod, a mock religious brotherhood devoted to obscene rituals and endless drinking. His parties featured mountains of food, gallons of alcohol, and behavior so grotesque that foreign ambassadors were shocked to witness them. Hygiene was not Peter's concern. He was frequently described as unkempt, reeking of alcohol, and splattered with food from his debauched feasts. He delighted in crude jokes and disturbing pranks, such as pulling teeth from servants or dissecting corpses for entertainment in front of horrified audiences. To many, these habits made him not just eccentric but monstrous. Yet Peter's excesses were matched by his ambition. He built St. Petersburg, reformed the Russian military, and established Russia as a European power. His brilliance as a ruler coexisted with his disturbing appetite for filth, cruelty, and indulgence. In the end, Peter the Great remains a paradox, a visionary emperor who shaped Russia's destiny, but whose personal life was dominated by the dirt, excess, and grotesque indulgences that made him one of the dirtiest rulers in history. King number 4. Charles II of England, the merry monarch of decay. Charles II, often called the Merry Monarch, returned to the English throne in 1660 after years of civil war and republican rule. His reign is remembered for its lively court, filled with music, theater, and pleasure. Yet behind the charm of his nickname lay a ruler whose personal habits and lifestyle earned him a reputation for filth and excess. Charles II was notorious for his endless appetite for indulgence. He surrounded himself with mistresses, courtiers, and hangers-on who joined him in nights of drinking, gambling, and debauchery. His palaces were said to reek of perfume, sweat, and unwashed bodies, with servants struggling to keep up with the waste and disorder of the royal household. Hygiene was an afterthought. Clothes went unchanged for long stretches, and the king himself was described as slovenly, often lounging in garments stained with food and wine. His promiscuity only added to his reputation for decay. Charles fathered a staggering number of illegitimate children, flaunting his affairs in public and showering mistresses with titles and riches. To many of his subjects, this disregard for morality, combined with the filth of his court, reflected poorly on the dignity of the monarchy. Even foreign visitors wrote with shock about the decadence of his reign, calling his court one of the dirtiest in Europe. And yet, despite the squalor, Charles was beloved by many. His wit, charisma, and ability to restore stability after years of turmoil earned him loyalty. Theaters reopened, art flourished, and a sense of joy returned to England. Still, history remembers not only the merriment, but the dirt, the stains of indulgence and neglect that clung to the king and his court. Charles II remains a symbol of contradiction, a monarch who brought laughter and life back to England. While embodying the filth and moral decay of his own indulgent age, King number 5, Henry VIII of England. The king of gluttony and rot. Few monarchs are as infamous as Henry VIII of England, remembered for his 6 wives, his brutal politics, and his ruthless break with the Catholic Church. Yet alongside his legendary reputation as a tyrant was another reality. Henry lived in filth, gluttony, and decay, earning a place among history's dirtiest kings. In his youth, Henry was athletic and charismatic, but years of excess quickly transformed him into a grotesque figure. Obsessed with food, he consumed enormous feasts of meat, pies, and ale, leaving behind mountains of waste. By middle age, he had grown morbidly obese, his body plagued by sores and ulcers that leaked pus and left him reeking. His courtiers often complained of the stench that filled his chambers, but no one dared to confront the king directly. Henry's hygiene was appalling. He was too heavy to move easily. He rarely bathed and relied on attendants to clean him superficially with cloths and perfumes. His bandaged wounds festered, attracting flies, while his decaying teeth and constant indigestion added to the foul atmosphere around him. The once proud king had become a bloated shell of himself, drowning in his own indulgence. But his filthiness was not just physical, it was moral. Henry discarded wives when they no longer pleased him, executing some and casting others aside. His court was drenched in fear, corruption, and betrayal, all stemming from a monarch who believed his will was law. As to his subjects, Henry represented both power and corruption. A king who reshaped England, but at a terrible cost. Henry VIII remains a symbol of gluttony, rot, and tyranny. His reign left England forever changed. But his personal legacy is stained with filth, proof that even the mightiest ruler can be undone by his own excesses. History often dresses kings in glory crowns of gold, robes of silk, and portraits of majesty. But as we've seen tonight, the reality was far less noble. Behind the thrones and titles were men whose habits were as foul as their power was great. From James I, the unwashed monarch of England, to Louis XIV, the Sun King who despised baths. From Peter the Great, whose excess and grotesque indulgences shocked even his own court, to Charles II, the merry monarch whose pleasure-filled court reeked of filth. And finally, Henry VIII, the bloated tyrant consumed by gluttony and rot. Each king reminds us that filth was not confined to peasants' huts, thrived in palaces just as much as in the streets. Their reigns may have shaped nations, but their personal lives reveal the human flaws behind the crowns. Power, wealth, and grandeur could not mask the dirt, the stench, or the moral decay that history could never quite wash away. If you enjoyed this dark journey through the filthiest chapters of royalty, don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow history lovers, subscribe to Whispers Through Time. More tales of forgotten secrets, dark legends, and hidden truths from the past await. Because sometimes the dirtiest stories are the ones that kings tried hardest to hide.